this new idea does not fit in with the way we used to do things, I think we can all certainly agree it will dramatically improve operations.
I hope you'll consider this new plan on its merits.
Thank you for a very interesting proposal. We all appreciate your effort, and I can assure you that we will give it our full attention.
Well, I don't appreciate it. This would rearrange my entire department. They have no idea who
Another
throws
crazy
babies.
proposal, and now I'm late for my next meeting. I don't know why these meetings have to drag on for...
How do they know this idea will work? They've only been here a couple of months.
They don't know how we do things here. Don't they understand we're successful because we do it that way?
It's so easy to say no to a new idea. After all, new ideas cause change. They disrupt the status quo. They create uncertainty. And it's less work to do it the way we've always done it before. Less work, maybe. More dangerous, definitely. New ideas are resisted from boardrooms to shop floors all over the world. Good ideas are shot down by people who assume that the future is merely an extension of the past, that the ideas that have brought us to where we are today are the same ideas that are going to take us to tomorrow. My name is Joel Barker. I'm a futurist. I've worked with corporations and institutions all over the world, helping them to improve their ability to evaluate new ideas and to anticipate change. For almost 20 years, I've been studying change. In particular, I've been studying the resistance to change that often keeps a great new idea from being accepted. You see, it's never been any different. Whether that great idea was a better way to do company business or a scientific breakthrough, people have always resisted change. In Venice in the 16th century, that was Galileo's problem. He was an advocate of the Copernican theory that the sun, not the earth, was the center of the solar system. To prove that theory to the leaders of the day, he took them to the top of that tower, the Tower of San Marco. And there, using his newly perfected telescope, he showed them the discoveries he had made in the night sky that verified that the earth revolved around the sun and not the other way around. Well, to say the least, that was a revolutionary idea. It contradicted obvious observation. In fact, it so antagonized the voices of authority that Galileo was threatened with torture in order to get him to retract his position. And you thought you had trouble selling your ideas. In the end, Galileo's ideas won out. But the real question here is, why the resistance? Whether it's in the 16th century or the 20th century, what prevents us from seeing, accepting, and understanding new ideas? Think about some of the new ideas we've seen in the past 2 decades. From minorities fighting for their basic rights to those rights being guaranteed by law. From room-sized computers costing millions of dollars to desktop computers just as powerful that almost anyone can afford. From an attitude that quality was a luxury for the few to quality being expected by everyone. These changes and hundreds like them are more than mere improvements. They are revolutions. They are changing the world forever. They are causing us to reevaluate old ways of doing things. They are opening doors to possibilities we could not have seen before. They are freeing us from limitations. And yet every one of these ideas was met with substantial resistance from thoughtful people. Let me ask you again, what is it that keeps us from accepting new ideas? I know the answer to that question. And once you know the answer, you will be more open to innovation, more capable of leading change. You will be ready to discover the future. You see, it all has to do with paradigms. Paradigm. That's an unusual word. You don't hear it every day. I stumbled onto it almost 20 years ago during my studies of scientific discovery. It was a word Thomas Kuhn used to describe a key concept in his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. If you look paradigm up in the Webster's Dictionary, you'd find it means a pattern or a model. Let me offer you another definition. Paradigms are sets of rules and regulations that do 2 things. First, they establish boundaries. In a sense, that's what a pattern does. It gives us the edges, the borders. Second, these rules and regulations then go on to tell you how to be successful by solving problems within these boundaries. In his book, Thomas Kuhn was exploring how scientists changed their paradigms of physics or chemistry or biology, and what happened when they did. What he found helps explain why we so often fail to anticipate significant new developments. What he found can help you and me deal with change more effectively. So, what did he discover? Kuhn discovered that paradigms act as filters that screen data coming into the scientist's mind. Data that agrees with the scientist's paradigm has an easy pathway to recognition. In fact, scientists see that kind of data amazingly well, with great clarity and understanding, and that's good. But Kuhn also discovered a startling negative effect. With some of the data, scientists had substantial difficulty. Why? Because that data did not match the expectations created by their paradigms. And in fact, the more unexpected the data was, the more trouble the scientists had perceiving it. In some cases, they simply ignored the unexpected data. Sometimes they distorted that data until it fit their paradigm rather than acknowledge that it was an exception to the rules. And in extreme cases, Kuhn discovered that scientists literally, physiologically, were incapable of perceiving the unexpected data. For all intents and purposes, that data was invisible. To put it in more general terms, paradigms filter incoming experience. We are viewing the world through our paradigms all the time. We constantly select from the world that data that best fits our rules and regulations and try to ignore the rest. As a result, what may be perfectly obvious to a person with one paradigm may be totally imperceptible to someone with a different paradigm. I call this phenomenon the paradigm effect. And I have seen repeatedly that what Kuhn describes for scientists is true for anyone who has strongly held rules and regulations in their lives. And who doesn't? In my work with companies around the world, I have seen this paradigm effect blind business people to new opportunities, cause salespeople to overlook new markets, obscure effective strategies from management, and it can blind each and every one of us to creative solutions to difficult problems. Whether it's the Army or the environmental movement, the American Medical Association or the League of Women Voters, whether it's Citibank or IBM, the coach's way to hit the ball or mom's way to clean the kitchen, we deal with paradigms all the time. And I believe that it is our rules and regulations that keep us from successfully anticipating the future, because we try to discover the future by looking for it through our old paradigms. And so in the 1960s, we looked forward and concluded, cheap gas forever. 4 children make an ideal family. Cable television will never catch on. Japanese products will always be junk. And boy, were we wrong. And we were wrong because our paradigms had the power to keep us from seeing what was really happening. Now, you may think this is an interesting abstraction. So I would like to give you concrete examples that demonstrate how paradigms influence the way you and I see and understand the world. I'd like to start with an example similar to one that Thomas Kuhn cites in his book. I'm going to use elements most of you know quite well, cards from a card deck. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you 8 cards very rapidly. I want you to identify them silently to yourself as I go through them. I'll give you a couple of seconds between each card. Ready? Here we go. Good. Now let's go through it a second time for those of you who may have missed some. This time I'm going to give you twice as much time as I gave you the first time. Ready? Go. All right. We're going to go through it one more time just to check things out. This time I'm going to give you 4 times as much time as the last time. Ready? Here we go. Okay, that's it. How many of you noticed something strange about these cards? For example, the second card was a red spade, or that the 5th card was a black heart, or that the last card was another red spade. I know most of you missed these exceptions on the first run through. And I know most of you missed them on the second run-through, too. But I would also bet that almost all of you identified the legitimate cards when they came up. You see, you were misled by your rules and regulations about the way a deck of cards is supposed to be, your card deck paradigm. And that is what was blocking your vision of the exceptional cards. Remember what I said about paradigms, how they filter data? Well, you were trying to see the cards the right way. Right means according to your card deck paradigm. Black spades, black clubs, red hearts, red diamonds. And so you saw the legitimate cards very easily, very quickly. In fact, I know the majority of you saw those cards on the first run through, and that was quicker than a 30th of a second. But your paradigm of card decks also made it very difficult to see the cards that didn't fit the rules. And so instead of seeing them as they were, you distorted the data to try to make it fit your paradigm. That's the paradigm effect in action. And every time you run into something that's beyond the boundaries of your paradigm, you will have difficulty seeing it. You just won't get it. Now, this is a funny deck of cards. So you might want to write off this entire experience as interesting but irrelevant to real life. So let's talk about paradigms and real life. For instance, millions of Americans have now adopted the fitness paradigm. They have brand new rules and regulations about exercise. But how many of you would be willing to go for a 70-mile run? Yes, I said run. Now, in Western culture, the words 70 miles and run just don't go together. 70 miles and drive, yes. Run, no. But in northern Mexico, 70-mile runs are common among the Tarahumaran Indians. They do it as part of a religious festival. Now, why is it so easy for them, yet so impossible for us? Because it's one of the Tarahumaran paradigms. They run everywhere for fun. Would you believe our ultimate race, the 26-mile marathon, is child's play for the Tarahumarans? Now, you might want to argue it's some kind of genetic difference, but I'm willing to bet if any of you had been raised in one of their villages, you'd run just like they do, because you would have learned their running paradigm. I've brought you to this vocational technical center in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, to show you another paradigm. This one has to do with automobiles. In 1976, a group of students in the advanced class taught by Ernie Parker decided to build an energy-efficient car. Let me give you the numbers on the car. It weighed 2,000 pounds. It went 0 to 60 in less than 10 seconds. It got 77 miles per gallon on a 16-horsepower engine. Now, anybody who knows anything about cars knows that that's impossible. You can't take that heavy a car to those speeds with only a 16-horsepower engine. And yet, these students did exactly that. How? By using a different paradigm. You see, these students weren't in the advanced auto mechanics class. They were right here in the advanced fluid power technology class. And they knew, using their paradigm, that they could capture and reuse energy ordinary cars waste. Let me show you how. It's actually a very simple design. When this car slows down, it doesn't use standard brakes, which just create heat and friction. Instead, the back wheels turn a hydraulic pump, and it pumps hydraulic fluid into this storage chamber and builds up pressure. Now, building up that pressure is resistance, and that slows the car down. When this car is at a stop sign, it doesn't idle its engine. Instead, it runs the engine 80% open throttle, and that engine turns a hydraulic pump which pumps more fluid and pressure into that storage chamber. Result, when this car begins to accelerate after the stoplight has changed, the acceleration comes not from the little engine, but all that energy that's been stored in that cylinder. In fact, let me demonstrate. I can accelerate without even starting the engine. So, the little gasoline engine merely holds the car at speed, and it can do that getting more than 70 miles per gallon. That's pretty clever. Now, the paradigm question is this. If the students who designed this car had been in auto mechanics, do you think they could have even conceived it? I think the answer is no, because the auto mechanics paradigm does not provide for waste energy storage. Now, I'm not suggesting this car is perfect. It has lots of bugs, but it does demonstrate how powerful paradigms can be. What may be impossible with one paradigm may be easy to do with another paradigm. Let me show you another paradigm change in technology. This one is small but interesting, especially to me. What is this? Look at it this way. Look at it this way. Look at it this way. Yes, it's a bicycle seat, and obviously it breaks the bicycle seat paradigm. It was invented by a sculptor and a futurist. I was the futurist. Jeffrey Birch was a sculptor. I came up with the idea, and together we developed it. We call it the Easy Seat. Now, it's no big deal. It's not going to save the world or anything like that, though it does save some pain in a few particularly sensitive areas. When you look at it, it makes a kind of sense, doesn't it? And yet, from the invention of the bicycle, another shape has totally dominated the market. It looks like this, and it's called a bicycle saddle. And I believe it is the word saddle that has kept bike makers from exploring shapes like the Easy Seat. You see, this is a logical redesign of a horse saddle for a bicycle. And once they got the saddle paradigm, the bike makers honed it and refined it and forgot to ask the basic question: what is the most comfortable way to sit on a bicycle? And that's where I had an advantage. I wasn't part of the bicycle industry. I didn't know any better. I wasn't saddled with their paradigm. And so I invented an unusual-looking but comfortable bike seat. By the way, you can imagine what avid bikers think of the Easy Seat. It doesn't fit the rules, so they don't like it. Yet. There is a story told in business circles worth repeating here. In the late 1930s, an inventor was trying to interest corporations in his new idea. He experienced rejection after rejection because no one was taking his invention seriously. He brought it to the research department of a major photographic company. He felt sure they would be interested because his invention was a new kind of photography. Here is the actual kit he used to demonstrate the process. While a senior researcher looked on, he began by sensitizing a specially coated metal plate. Then he took a transparency and placed the metal plate on top of it and exposed both to a very bright light. Then he poured a fine black powder over the plate and tapped the excess away. What was left on the plate was a faint reminder of the image that had been on the slide. He had, in fact, created a kind of photograph of that image. Now, we don't know what the researcher said about all this. He may have found it amusing and laughed. He may have said it was too complicated or too crude. Or he may have been upset at all the black powder all over his desk. But we do know one thing for sure. He wasn't interested in that silly invention, so he showed the inventor to the door. But the inventor, Chester Carlson, had the last laugh. Here's a copy of his original patent. His discovery turned out to be one of the most profitable innovations in the history of industry. You see, what Chester Carlson invented was electrostatic photography, the Xerox process. Imagine any office today without a copier. But that photographic researcher was blinded to the potential of this new invention because it didn't fit his rules and regulations of how photography should be. He was unable to see beyond his paradigm. As a result, his company missed one of the biggest business opportunities of the 20th century. Let me show you another example of the power and influence of paradigms. Join me now as I'm giving a lecture to a group of corporate managers. I'm going to show you 3 words, all right? And I'm going to ask you to think back to the early 60s and ask yourself, what kinds of judgmental statements, judgmental feelings would I have had about these 3 words back in the early 60s? The 3 words are made in Japan. Okay, now in 1960, what are the words that would have come to mind when you saw those products, please? Junk. Junk, all right. What else?
Cheap.
Cheap. Okay, what else?
Poor quality.
Poor quality, that's a good one. Poor quality. What else?
Copies.
Copies. Those are stealing again. What else?
Low tech.
All right. Okay. Good. Toys. Low tech. Toys. Anything else come to mind?
Imitation.
Imitation. Okay, that's enough. Now, let's ask about today. What kinds of judgmental words come to mind when you run into these 3 words? Made in Japan.
Excellent quality.
Excellent quality. Okay, what else?
High tech.
High tech. Aha, that's good. What else?
Expensive.
Expensive. Went from cheap to expensive, huh? Okay, another one.
Leadership.
Okay, another one.
Balance of payments.
Another one.
Innovation.
Innovation. What a nice compliment. Anything else? All right. Actually, that's enough when you look at it. What's most interesting about this is, do you notice the contrasts? In many cases, you have given me opposites. What they were doing in the early 60s, they have totally reversed in the 80s. And the key point here is this. What this represents, I believe, is a change of paradigms. What they did, and they actually started in the 50s when Ed Deming, an American, went to Japan, is they adopted a new series of rules and regulations, what we call zero defect production, or now we're calling it Japanese management or participatory management. And what they did is they got people involved in perfecting things. See, I believe the Japanese have created an epidemic of quality worldwide. And it's a disease which, if you don't get it, you may not survive. People tell me, paradigms, that's a cute idea, but who really cares? Tell me about it. There is a crucial and profound truth hiding behind all the paradigm examples I've shown you. I call it the going back to zero rule, and if you remember nothing else, remember this. When a paradigm shifts, everyone goes back to zero. It doesn't matter how big your market share is, or how strong your reputation, or how good you are at the old paradigm. With the new one, you go back to zero. Your past success guarantees nothing. Now, you may think I'm exaggerating, so let me illustrate. What nation dominated the world of watchmaking in 1968? Of course, Switzerland, renowned for more than 100 years for watchmaking excellence. In 1968, they had 65% of the world market share, and according to expert estimations, more than 80% of the profits. That's market domination. Yet, 10 years later, their market share had plummeted to below 10%, and in the ensuing 3 years, they had to release 50,000 of their 65,000 watch workers. Today, what nation dominates the world in watchmaking? Japan. In 1968, they had virtually no market share. How could the Swiss, who commanded the watchmaking industry for the entire 20th century, who were known for excellence and innovation in their products, be so rapidly destroyed? Well, the answer is painfully simple. They were put back to zero by a paradigm shift. Many of you are wearing that paradigm shift on your wrists right now. The Quartz Movement Watch. Think about it. Totally electronic. 1,000 times more accurate than the mechanical watches it replaced. Battery powered. Amazingly versatile. It deserves to be the new paradigm of timekeeping. It's such a brilliant idea. Wouldn't you like to know who invented this marvelous watch? Some of you know the answer, but those of you who don't will be surprised. The Quartz watch was invented by the Swiss themselves, right here in Neuchâtel at their research laboratories. Yet when the researchers presented this idea to the Swiss watch manufacturers in 1967, it was rejected. After all, it didn't have any bearings, it didn't have any gears, it didn't even have a mainspring. It couldn't possibly be the future of watches. So confident were the manufacturers in that conclusion that they didn't even protect the idea. And so later that year, their researchers displayed the watch to the world at the annual Watch Congress. Texas Instruments of America and Seiko of Japan walked past, took one look, and the rest is history. Now, why didn't the Swiss appreciate this wonderful invention that their own people had created? It's the power of paradigms again. They were blinded by the success of their old paradigm and all their investments in it. And when confronted with a profoundly new and different way to continue their success into the future, they rejected it because it didn't fit the rules they were already so good at. Please keep in mind that this is a story not just about the Swiss. It's a story about anyone, any organization, any nation who assumes what has been successful in the past must continue to be successful in the future. Let me remind you once again, when a paradigm shifts, everyone goes back to zero. Your past guarantees nothing in the future if the rules change. Not even the best watchmakers in the world could stop time. In fact, if you're not careful, your successful past will block your vision to the future. And that is why you must develop an openness to new ideas, a willingness to explore different ways of doing things. Because only through that kind of tolerance can you keep open your doors to the future. I could go on and on with examples. I have more than 350 in my files. The key point here is paradigms dramatically affect our judgments and our decision-making by influencing our perceptions. And it is clear to me that if we want to make good judgments about the future, to anticipate the future successfully, we must be able to recognize our present paradigms and then be ready to go beyond them. You see, a paradigm is a two-edged sword. When you swing it one way, it cuts the information that agrees with it into very fine, precise detail. But when you swing it the other way, it will cut you away from data that runs counter to the paradigm. You see best what you're supposed to see, just like the Swiss. And you see poorly or not at all that data that doesn't fit the paradigm. Let me now share with you the key observations about paradigms. Number one, paradigms are common. We have them in almost all aspects of our life, whether it's professional or personal, spiritual or social. Point number two, paradigms are useful. Now you may have thought I don't like paradigms because of all the things I've said about them, but that's not the case. In fact, they show us what's important and what's not. They help us find important problems, and then they go on to give us rules for helping to solve those problems. They focus our attention, and that's good. But, and this is point number three, and it's a warning, sometimes your paradigm can become the paradigm, the only way to do something. And when you're confronted with an alternative idea, you reject it out of hand. Now that can lead to a nasty disorder. I call that disorder paradigm paralysis. Paradigm paralysis is a terminal disease of certainty. It's easy to get, and more than a few institutions have been destroyed by it. That's exactly what happened to the Swiss watch manufacturers in 1968. This reminds me of a phrase. Those who say it cannot be done should get out of the way of those who are doing it. Point number 4. The people who create new paradigms are usually outsiders. They are not part of the established paradigm community. Now, they can be young, they can be old. Age seems to be irrelevant. But what is clear is they are not invested in the old paradigm, so they have nothing to lose by creating the new. Now, this means something very special for you, because if you want to find the new paradigms that are developing in your field, you must look beyond the center to the fringes, because almost always the new rules are written at the edge. That's where Xerox started. That's where Apple computers began. That's where the women's movement started. All of them at the edge. Point number 5. Those practitioners of the old paradigm who choose to change to the new paradigm early in its development, I call them paradigm pioneers, have to be very courageous. Because you see, the evidence provided by the new paradigm does not prove that they should be doing this. Now, let me quote from Thomas Kuhn, because he writes about this situation the very best. The person who embraces a new paradigm at an early stage must often do so in defiance of the evidence provided by the problem solving. He must, that is, have faith that the new paradigm will succeed with the many large problems that confront it, knowing only that the older paradigm has failed in a few. A decision of that kind can only be made on faith. The mark of a true paradigm pioneer is great courage and trust in their judgment. Now for the last point, and the most important. You can choose to change your rules and regulations. Human beings are not genetically encoded to just one way of looking at the world. You can choose to shrug off one paradigm and adopt a new paradigm. You can choose to see the world anew. That's why I'm such an optimist about the future. Now, to challenge you to flex your paradigms, I would like to give you the paradigm shift question. Whenever I'm with an organization or company, I always ask this question of them. What today is impossible to do in your business, but if it could be done, would fundamentally change what you do? Think about that. Hard. Ask that question. Play with it. But ask it on a regular basis, everywhere in your organization, because the answers to that question will take you to the boundaries of your paradigm. And once you are there, you will be ready to see the next paradigms coming. Remember, what is impossible today may be the norm tomorrow. And your challenge is either to cause that to happen or be ready to pioneer. There's a story I'd like to tell you now. There once was a young man with a very fast car who loved to drive on country roads. He thought of himself as a great driver. He could handle anything. One day he was out driving his favorite road and coming into his favorite curve when around the curve came a car careening out of control. And just before it got to him, it pulled into its lane. As it passed, the woman yelled out, "Pig!" Well, he responded in a flash and shot back, "Cow!" He thought to himself, how dare she call me a name? I was in my lane. She was the one who was all over the place. But he felt rather smug because he got her before she got away. And so he put the accelerator to the floor, whipped around the curve, and ran into the pig. Now that's a paradigm story. You see, the young man was responding with old rules. You call me a name, I'll call you a name. Yet when you think about it, she was really trying to warn him. I believe the next 10 years are going to be filled with people coming around blind curves yelling things at you. And if you have paradigm flexibility, what you will be hearing will be opportunities. But if you have paradigm paralysis, what you will be hearing will sound like threats. The choice will be entirely yours. We've been talking about the anticipation of the future, so you may wonder what we're doing in front of this house from the late 19th century. I've chosen to conclude my remarks here because sometimes people get overwhelmed by the future. They look forward and they say, how can we cope with all of this change? The answer to that question, I think, can be found by looking back to our great-grandparents. In many ways, they dealt with changes at least as profound as what we're involved in right now. You must remember, in 1890, radio would have still been considered magic. I mean, inaudible voices traveling through the air without wires. The radio wasn't demonstrated until 1901. Between 1890 and 1910, Henry Ford built his first automobile. The movie camera was invented. The Wright brothers proved the experts wrong and created a new paradigm of heavier-than-air flight. X-rays were discovered. Electric lights had only begun to replace kerosene lamps and gas illumination. The electron was discovered. The cause of malaria was identified. And a man named Albert Einstein proved that E equals mc squared, and the atomic age was conceived. The paradigms of our grandparents were forever altered during this time. And you know what? In spite of all that change, they did just fine. We wouldn't be here if they hadn't. So, even though the future sometimes seems too large, too awesome, too powerful to deal with, it's not. We as human beings have demonstrated repeatedly the capacity to create and deal with paradigm changes. You see, there will always be another solution to the problem. There will always be another door to go through to get to the future. And just like it was for our grandparents, I am positive that on the other side of that door lies more than enough opportunity to keep those of us who are willing to be flexible happy and busy for a lifetime.